Ben and I have been playing around with a form history pattern as a way to getting around the undo pattern, which is often hard to implement, especially in the browser. So I went and took that pattern that Ben talked about in one of his usability talks and implemented it using gears in a way that I had an address book that as I went and edited a particular contact and saved it, it would store all of the past information. I could go back in time and kind of view what's going on. Then I found myself at a Adobe event where they wanted me to speak about AppEngine. So I was thinking about the whole cloud, and people were then asking, how is this relevant to the RAA kind of way of thinking and rich Ajax apps as part of that? And I think Jonathan Schwartz kind of nailed this one, where he talked about how, you know, the RAA stuff is great, Ajax stuff is great, but you need some kind of back end. And as you do have these richer things going on in the client, it allows us to think a little bit differently and build actual web services in the back end, as opposed to using these kind of more complicated web frameworks that have to tie everything together in that middle tier. We can actually, for the first time, kind of partition things into web services that we haven't really been able to do for quite a while. So I took my Gears address book example and I created a simple AppEngine application and created web services to kind of mimic the ways that I was going to deal with the data. And so that's how we have this load contact service that gives me back a JSON representation of my contacts and a save contact as a way to kind of store new things up in the cloud. So now let's take a look at the code and in general look at how you actually deploy apps in AppEngine and the various tools that we have. Here we've opened up the Google App Engine launcher, which is a wrapper around the SDK that you can download and use through command line and such as you wish. What we're going to do here is we're going to start up our application, the Address Book History app, and that's going to kick off a process that's going to be running this on this particular port. And I'm going to browse to that location, and we're going to have an empty list because this is the first time running a clean install. And I've got a little helper here that's going to run and load some dummy data into the system that I'm then going to reload. And now I have access to these users. Now the history piece is the ability to go back in time and see what addresses I lived in this situation in the past. So I can go back and kind of see what's going on. Okay, so we've got this simple application. Now let's go ahead and look at how we actually implemented mainly the back-end piece of AppEngine itself. Okay, so we'll start at the top with the configuration of the app. We've got a given name here. We've got the version of AppEngine and the runtime, which is just Python for now. And then we have these simple URL handlers that are basically pointing scripts, images, and styles to a particular directory with a given MIME type. And then everything else is just going to go through and send itself over to this main file. Then there's ways also of just doing static single files to be able to do things, but in this case we don't need anything. So now let's shoot over to the file that actually does the work. Now this file has its own mappings down here that are the various web services that we're going to be implementing for the back end to that address book app. So we have the main handler where you go to the app for the very first time on the root, and then you have the actual services that load contacts and save them. So let's take a look at the main handler first. Here all we're doing is loading the actual UI. So we're going through and just loading this main.html, which is the HTML representation of the address book, and we're using a template system, the Django template system, so we could do replaces, for loops, ifs, and things like that, but in this case we're not doing anything. So really here we could have just done a direct mapping to the file, but this allows us to go through and kind of add things as we're doing things. So for example, I often have tests to say if I'm development, then use these URLs, if I'm in production, use these, things like that. So now if we take a look at the actual main.html itself, we'll see the client side, and all we have here is just a normal HTML page that has the different pieces that you see on the actual address book, including the slider controls and edits and saves and loading the dummy data. And then here is where we load in the JavaScript that's going to kick everything off. So if we look into this, into the address book, we're going to find the driver of this is just a window on load that's going to load up a new contact holder that as a byproduct is going to load things up. So as we go up to that, we have this initializer that's going to go ahead and do a load. That load then goes through, does a request to the web service that's running on AppEngine that's going to say give me all of the contacts, and then it's going to get back some data that it's then going to evaluate. So here we're just kind of doing a raw eval to get the data back from the server, and then we're going to go ahead and save this into a local data structure, set up the tabs on the left hand side with the various names, and then we're going to go through and set up a slider if it's the first time, or reload a slider if that makes sense. So let's take a look at this load contacts. If we go directly to URL, we're going to see the data structure that gets returned is all of the contacts and their different versions that we then loop through in that construct. If we go over and look at the actual back end, it's another simple system here where we go through and get the contacts back from the data model, which we'll look at in a second, and then we're going to go through and loop through and send out that data. So first let's look at the data model. Just a bare bones, very simple object here that is going to extend the model object, which is a key part of the data store API in AppEngine. We then just set up the different types of properties that we have that are going to hold this contact, and then we're good to go. So we've defined this, so you notice there's no schema, there's no create table or anything like that. It's just an object that we go ahead and set up. Now the all method is automatically there as an alias to grab everything. So that means grab all of the contacts that are in the data store and then render things through the template contacts.js. Here you'll see the for loop. This is the Django template in library that's just going to loop through and set up the nice little data that we'll be able to readily use in our JavaScript page. Now if we go back to that load-in, we'll notice that we create a new contact object, and that's just a wrapper object that we've created that just has some simple convenience methods to be able to get the number of contacts, be able to add things to the data structure and things like that. And then when you actually click on a contact, this is just the ugly DOM stuff that we use to create the right hand side and set the edit mode of being able to actually edit something. Now if we go ahead and look at editing, we can go through here and we can change some of these fields, and we can save it, and it now gives us these 3 entries and updates things over there. So let's see about that side of the equation. What we're doing there is we're doing a save to the database that's grabbing the new information that we have, and it's calling another AJAX request back to the other side of the house, doing a post to go ahead and load this new information into the data store. So if we go ahead and look at the data store side, all we're doing here is grabbing the post and we're getting the information from the web form, and we're just plugging it right into the data store. So this put is actually going to just go ahead and save this guy away. So that's kind of editing and playing with things. A few other things that are kind of fun is just to kind of show how things work a little bit with AppEngine. So here I'm going to cause an error, and we're going to see that I have an error telling us what's going on here, and then also we can go through and look at the logs and get on the log console, and it's also going to give us information with a full stack trace on what's happening. So it can give you full debugging during development on your local machine. Now we should go ahead and fix that guy, and we're also going to go ahead and fix another bug. So we had in here that we're going to go and do a reload when we load that dummy data, but this is actually incorrect. You need to force it doing this guy. So now that we've made this change, we'll be able to go through and we'll be able to test it out. So for one, we can use this Sdk Console that'll give us the ability to run interactive commands and also take a look at our data store. So I can go here and list the various entities that are in the system, and I'll just go ahead and delete all of these guys. It's going to ask me, are you sure? I'm going to say OK. Now I'm going to go back into the system, and it's going to be the bare bones again, and I'll be able to load the dummy data, and it automatically did the reload for me. Again, back to the original dummy, so it doesn't have the change that we made before when we went in and changed something to it. So great, now we've made that change, we may want to actually deploy that. So we can go into the system, we can hit deploy, it's going to go ahead and sign us in, and it's going to run this app config command line for us and just kind of put that into the system. So it's gone through and updated the system with that fix. So now we can go through and see what that's like by going to our dashboard. We can kind of see what's going on in the actual application, and then we can go to the live application, and now that's got our data within it on the live side of the situation. So we've got everything fixed. So thanks for that little whirlwind tour of a little application with some simple back end. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you guys have fun playing with AppEngine.